The cold of the metal floor seeped through Lee Chul's thin clothes. He sat with 99 other humans in the holding cell of the Zarkon starship. The air smelled strange, like ozone and something sour. It was a smell that said, "You are not welcome here." Chul was a quiet man. Before this, he was an engineer. He was good with machines and fixing problems. But he had a problem with a powerful corporation. He broke their things to stop them from breaking something more important. So they sent him here, to this ship, to his fate. Across from him, a woman named Park Ji-hai sat perfectly still. Her eyes were closed, but Chul could see she was not sleeping. She was assessing. Ji-hai was a soldier, or she used to be. She knew how to survive in bad places. Next to her, a younger man, Kim Min-soo, was nervously tapping his fingers on his knee. Min-soo was a botanist. He knew plants. Chul wondered what use plants would be on a death world. A door slid open without a sound. 2 Zarkon guards stood there. They were tall and thin, with shiny, dark skin that looked like insect shell. Their faces had no noses, just 2 slits, and their eyes were large and completely black. They did not speak. They just pointed long, thin fingers. It was time. The humans were led down a long, curved hallway. The walls were a pale, glowing white. Their footsteps made no noise. They entered a large, circular room. In the center, on a high platform, sat 3 Zarkon judges. They were the High Arbiters. They looked down at the humans like a person might look at a bug. The middle arbiter stood. Its voice was dry and raspy, like stones grinding together. A device on Chul's wrist translated the words into Korean. The species known as humanity, the arbiter began. You have been found guilty. Your crime is chaos. You fight amongst yourselves. You destroy your own world. You lack the harmony of the galactic consensus. You are a sickness. Chul listened, his face showing no emotion. He heard Min-soo take a shaky breath beside him. Your penalty is not death by our hands. The arbiter continued. That would be a kindness you have not earned. Your penalty is natural selection. You will be taken to a world called Xylos. It is a Class 12 death world. The atmosphere is corrosive. The water is poison. The native life exists only to hunt and kill. A screen lit up behind the judges. It showed a planet swirling with violent, violet storms. It showed landscapes of sharp, black rock and jungles of glowing, purple plants. It showed creatures with too many teeth and too many legs. The consensus has monitored your world, the arbiter said. We see your weakness, your soft skin, your slow bodies, your short lives. You will not last a single cycle on Xylos. Your suffering will be a lesson to any of your kind who would dare reach for the stars again. It will be a warning. The screen went dark. The room was silent. The arbiter expected screams. It expected begging. It saw these reactions from other species before their END.IT did not get them from the humans. Chul looked at the judge, then at the image of the Hellworld. He did not see a death sentence. He saw a problem. A very big, very dangerous problem. But still a problem. And problems were made to be solved. He glanced at Ji-hai. Her eyes were open now, and she was staring at the screen with a fierce, focused look. She was not seeing a nightmare. She was seeing a battlefield. She was already making a plan. Kim Min-soo had stopped his nervous tapping. He was staring at the images of the strange, aggressive plant life. His scientist's mind was already working, trying to identify patterns, looking for anything he might recognize, anything he could use. The guards began to move them out. There was no more ceremony. The verdict was given. The punishment was now. They were marched back to the holding area. This time they were given packs, basic survival gear, a knife, a water filter that the Zarkon said was marginally effective, some nutrient bars, a simple medical kit. It was almost an insult. They were loaded into a small, cramped dropship. The door sealed with a hiss. There were no windows. They felt a violent shudder as the dropship detached from the main ship. They were falling. The ride was rough. The ship shook and rattled. The air inside grew hot. People held onto the straps on the walls, their knuckles white. No one screamed. There were only grim faces and clenched jaws. After a long time, the shaking stopped. A heavy thud echoed through the hull. They had landed. The door opened with a blast of hot, wet air. The smell was overwhelming. It was a mix of rotten eggs, something metallic, and a sweet, sickly scent from the glowing purple flowers nearby. They stumbled out onto the ground. The sky above was a swirling mess of violet and green clouds. The sun, a dull red orb, was barely visible. The ground was a squishy, black soil that smoked slightly. In the distance, they could hear deep, rumbling roars and sharp, chittering sounds. The dropship's engines whined and then, with a final roar, it lifted off. It rose quickly through the toxic atmosphere, a silver speck against the angry sky, and then it was gone. Silence fell, broken only by the wind and the alien sounds of the jungle. 100 humans stood alone on a world that wanted them dead. The Zarkon captain, watching from orbit, noted the successful deployment. His report was simple. The human convicts are on the surface of Xylos. Life signs are erratic, indicating panic. Environmental hazards are already affecting them. The screaming will commence within the hour. Down on the surface, Li Chul bent down and picked up a handful of the black soil. It was warm and sizzled slightly on his skin. He let it fall through his fingers. Park Ji-hai was already climbing onto a nearby rock, scanning the horizon for threats, for shelter, for anything they could use. Kim Min-soo was crouching by one of the glowing plants, careful not to touch it, just observing. The screaming did not commence. Instead, Ji-hai's voice cut through the heavy air, clear and strong. Everyone, listen up. We don't have much light. We need a defensible position and we need to get a wall up before nightfall. Everyone, grab what you can carry. Move. The humans, a group of convicts, misfits and survivors, looked at her. For a moment, no one moved. Then Li Chul shouldered his pack and walked toward her. She is right, he said, his voice calm. This is our home now. Let's get to work. The problem had been presented. The work had begun. The first night was the longest of Park Ji-hai's life. The violet darkness was not quiet. It was filled with screams, clicks, and deep rumbles that made the ground shake. The humans huddled together in a small cave they had found near the landing site. It was not a good cave. It was damp and smelled of rot, but the opening was narrow. It was a place they could defend. Ji-hai did not sleep. She stood at the cave's entrance, a sharpened stick in her hand, and watched the moving shadows outside. Her mind was a map of threats and resources. They had little water. The food bars would be gone in a week. The cave was temporary. She knew they would have to move soon, find a better place, a permanent place. When the dim red sun finally rose, it revealed a world washed in a strange, bloody light. The acidic rain had stopped, but the air still burned their lungs. Li Chul was already working. He used the metal from their empty supply crates to dig a trench around the cave entrance. He was not a fighter, but he could build. He could make things. The water is the biggest problem, he said to Ji-hai. He held up his canteen. The Zarkon water filter was clogged with a greenish sludge after just one use. The rain will eat through our containers. We need a new way to collect and clean it. Kim Min-soo returned from a short scouting trip, his face pale. He pointed to a cluster of tall, bamboo-like plants with broad, bowl-shaped leaves. The rainwater collects in those leaves, he said, but it is still acidic. I would not drink it. He then showed them a thick, gray moss growing on the rocks near the cave. I saw a small, six-legged animal lick this moss. Where the moss grows, the soil is less poisonous. I think the moss neutralizes the acid. This was their first piece of good news. Chul immediately started experimenting. He used a piece of the moss to line a crude bowl he made from a rock. He poured in some of the acidic leaf water. They watched as the water slowly stopped smoking. It was a start. The days turned into a cycle of hard work and fear. Ji-hai organized everyone. The strong ones gathered wood for a palisade, a wall of sharpened sticks around the cave. Others, under Min-soo's direction, collected the gray moss and began spreading it on a patch of black soil near the cave. They planted the earth seeds they had smuggled in their clothes, a secret hope against the Hell's Cape. The predators came on the third night. It was a pack of creatures the humans called rippers, for their sharp, hooked claws. They were the size of large dogs, with 6 legs and bony plates on their backs. They moved silently through the darkness, their eyes glowing a faint green. The rippers hit the eastern side of the palisade, trying to push through the weak points. A scream tore through the night as a man was dragged through a gap. The sound was cut off quickly. Jihai was there in an instant. She did not have a gun. She had a spear, a long, strong branch with a knife tied tightly to the end. She thrust it into the side of one creature. It screeched, a horrible sound, and turned on her. Its claws ripped through her arm, but she held her ground, stabbing again. Others joined her. Li Chul used a burning torch from their fire, waving it at the animals. The rippers hesitated. They did not like the fire. They backed away, hissing, and melted back into the jungle, taking the body of the fallen man with them. The silence that followed was heavy. They had fought them off, but they had lost one of their own. Jihai's arm bled heavily. She let Minsu clean and wrap it, her face hard. The wall was not enough. The fire was not enough. "We need to be smarter," Chul said, looking at the blood on the ground. "We cannot fight them head-on. This world is stronger than we are." The next day, he and Jihai walked the perimeter. Chul looked at the ground, at the trees. He saw how the rippers had approached. He had an idea. He did not plan to build a stronger wall. He planned to build a trap. He took the strongest vines he could find and stretched them between trees at ankle height. Behind the tripwires, he dug shallow pits and lined them with sharpened stakes made from the purple wood. It was simple, but it was clever. It used the jungle itself. The rippers returned 2 nights later. This time, the humans were ready. They heard the snap of a vine, followed by a screech as a ripper fell into a pit. The other creatures hesitated, confused by the trap. The humans did not charge. They stood behind their palisade and threw their torches and spears. They drove the pack away without losing anyone. It was their first real victory. A small spark of hope ignited in the camp. Weeks passed. The patch of earth treated with the gray moss began to show green shoots. Their earth plants were growing. Minsu found a tuber that, after being boiled for a long time, lost its poison and could be eaten. It was tough and tasteless, but it was food. Chul perfected the water system. He made a still using a metal crate, some tubing from a broken medical kit, and the acid-neutralizing moss. It produced a slow, steady drip of clean, safe water. It was a miracle. They were no longer just reacting to threats. They were building a life. They had a routine. Guards on the wall, people tending the garden, others hunting for more food or improving the shelters. One evening, as the violet storms flashed in the distance, the group sat around their central fire. The mood was different. It was not the desperate silence of the first nights. There was quiet talk. Someone even laughed, a short, surprised sound. Li Chul looked at the faces around the fire. They were thinner, harder. They had scars, but they were alive. They had turned a cave into a home. They had turned poison into water. They had turned fear into a plan. Park Jihai sat beside him, sharpening her spear. She looked at the wall, at the garden, at the people. "The Zarkon thought we were weak," she said, her voice low. "They thought we would break." Chul nodded, watching the clean water drip slowly into a container. "They did not understand," he said. "A human's greatest need is not safety. It is a problem to solve. They gave us the biggest problem imaginable." He almost smiled. It was a gift. In the orbit above, the Zarkon monitoring station recorded the life signs on the surface. They were no longer erratic. They were stable, strong. The computer noted the anomaly but had no explanation. It simply reported, "Subject vitality remains consistent." The screaming had not commenced. Instead, something else had begun. Something the Zarkon could not measure. Something called hope. The seasons turned on Xylos. The humans learned to read the signs. The violent violet storms meant the hot season was ending. The air grew cooler, but the jungle became more active. The hunters were hungry. Their settlement, which they now called First Camp, was strong. The palisade wall was tall and sturdy. The garden was productive. They had a steady supply of clean water and food. But they needed to expand. They needed to know what was beyond the small valley they called home. Park Ji-hai led the scouting party. Lee Chul and Kim Min-soo went with her, along with 2 others. They moved carefully, away from the familiar territory and into the deep jungle. This part of the world was different. The trees were taller, their leaves a deep, angry red. The air hummed with a low, ultrasonic sound that made their teeth ache. Min-soo called it the screaming jungle. They were looking for new resources, maybe a source of metal, or better stone for tools, or new plants that could be useful. They found death instead. It started as a vibration in the ground, a low rumble that grew steadily louder. The birds in the red trees fell silent. The constant insect noise stopped. Ji-hai held up a closed fist. Everyone froze. The ground in front of them erupted. Dirt and roots flew into the air. A creature emerged from the hole. It was massive, as big as a bus. Its body was a series of thick, armored segments. It had no visible eyes, just a huge, circular mouth lined with rows of rotating, crystal teeth. 6 powerful, stubby legs dug into the soil. It was the thing that made the distant roars they heard at night. They had never seen one up close. They called it the Dreadmaw. It moved with shocking speed, its bulk slamming into one of the scouts before anyone could react. The man, a strong hunter named Jay, disappeared into the gaping mouth. There was a single, choked cry, and then the sound of grinding. "Run!" Ji-hai screamed. It was useless. The Dreadmaw turned towards them, its mouth gaping. They fired their spears. The sharp points just bounced off its armored hide. Chul threw one of their few precious explosives, a crude gunpowder charge. It exploded against the creature's side with a loud bang, but only left a black smudge. The Dreadmaw did not even seem to notice. It charged again. This time, its target was Kim Min-soo. The botanist stood frozen in terror. Lee Chul acted without thinking. He grabbed a heavy rock and threw it, not at the creature, but at a nearby tree. The rock hit a beehive-like structure. A swarm of angry, buzzing insects poured out. They descended on the Dreadmaw, distracting it for a precious few seconds. Chul yanked Min-soo out of the way just as the monster thundered past. "It's no use. Our weapons are nothing to it?" One of the remaining scouts yelled, his voice shaking with panic. Ji-hai looked around, her soldiers' mind racing. They could not fight it. They could not outrun it. They had to outthink it. Her eyes fell on the ground. She remembered the map they had been making. The geothermal vents. Just a mile from here, the land was unstable, dotted with thin crusts of rock that hid pools of superheated plasma beneath. The ground there was always warm, always smoking. "We have to lead it," she shouted to Chul over the creature's roar. "To the hot grounds." Chul understood immediately. It was a terrible risk. One misstep and they would be the ones boiled alive. But it was their only chance. "Min-soo, you and him, run that way." Chul pointed. "Make noise. Get its attention. We will flank it." Min-soo and the other scout started shouting and waving their arms. The Dreadmaw, now free of the stinging insects, turned its head towards the new noise. It began to pursue them. Ji-hai and Chul ran a parallel path, staying just within the creature's sight. They were the lure, keeping it interested, keeping it moving in the right direction. The ground began to feel warm under their feet. Patches of sickly yellow fungus glowed between the rocks. The air smelled strongly of sulfur. They reached the edge of the geothermal field. The ground was a patchwork of solid rock and areas that looked like brittle gray paper. Steam hissed from small cracks. "Now!" Ji-hai yelled. She and Chul sprinted across a wide, solid-looking slab of rock. The Dreadmaw followed, its huge body crushing the smaller stones in its path. It was focused only on its prey. Chul looked down, his heart pounding. He could see the ground flexing under the creature's immense weight. He saw a large, thin area just ahead of them, He met Jihai's eyes. She gave a sharp nod. This was the spot. They put on a final burst of speed, leaping from the solid slab onto a firm rocky outcrop on the other side of the thin crust. They turned, breathing heavily. The dreadmaw charged onto the brittle ground. There was a loud, sharp crack, like ice breaking. The gray crust shattered beneath it. The creature let out a deafening, confused roar as its front half plunged into the hole. A blast of incredible heat hit the humans' faces. A geyser of glowing orange plasma erupted from the broken ground, engulfing the dreadmaw's head and front segments. The roar became a high-pitched shriek that was cut off almost instantly. The smell of cooked meat and burnt rock filled the air. The creature's back legs twitched for a moment and then were still. Its back half rested on the edge of the vent, smoking. Silence returned to the jungle, broken only by the hiss of the vent. Minsu and the other scout emerged from the trees, their faces pale with shock and relief. They all stood together, looking at the remains of the monster. Jihai put a hand on Chul's shoulder. Her grip was firm. "You saved us," she said simply. Chul shook his head, still staring at the vent. "We saved us," he corrected her. "We used the planet. We did not fight it with our strength. We used its strength." This was the true turning point. The victory over the Rippers had been about defense. This was different. This was about turning the greatest danger of Xylos into a weapon. They had not just survived an attack. They had conquered the apex predator. They walked back to first camp, tired but changed. They carried a new understanding with them. Xylos was not just an enemy to be kept out. It was a tool to be used. Its acid, its storms, its deadly creatures, its burning heart. All of it could be part of their survival, part of their future. That night, the council met. Li Chul spoke for a long time. He did not talk about stronger walls. He talked about mapping every geothermal vent. He talked about studying the acid pools. He talked about learning the paths of the other great predators. Park Jihai listened and agreed. Their goal was no longer just to live. It was to master the hell they had been given. Years passed. The 100 convicts were now a community of over 300. First camp was no longer a camp. It was a town, a bustling village they had named Hope's Respite. It was built into the side of a tall, stable mesa, safe from the floods of the rainy season. Li Chul's engineering had transformed the place. They did not live in caves anymore. They lived in homes carved into the rock, with strong doors and windows made of a clear, tough material they had created from melted sand and tree sap. The homes were warm and dry. The most amazing thing was the power. Chul had led a team to build a network of pipes and turbines around the geothermal vents. They harnessed the planet's burning heart. Now, soft electric lights glowed in every home and along the stone pathways. It pushed back the fearful violet darkness and made the night feel safe. The gardens had become farms. Kim Minsu's work had turned the poisonous soil into rich earth. They grew earth potatoes and carrots next to strange, purple xylosian tubers. They had even found a sweet, juicy fruit that grew on a vine, a treat for the children. And there were children, many of them. They were the first true natives of Xylos. They ran through the stone corridors, their laughter echoing. They did not know Earth. They did not know a life without the hum of the geothermal plant or the sight of the 2 moons in the sky. This world was not a hell to them. It was home. Park Ji-hai was the settlement's chief of security and its unofficial mayor. She walked through Hope's Respite one morning, inspecting the new watchtower. She saw a group of children playing a game. They were pretending to be rippers, chasing each other and growling. One of them, a little girl, stood on a rock and shouted, "I am the Dreadmaw. I am going to eat you." And the others ran away, squealing with laughter. Ji-hai stopped and watched them. A strange feeling settled in her chest. It was not fear or worry. It was pride. These children were not afraid of the monsters. They saw them as part of their world, as things to be understood, even played with. She found Li Chul at the main geothermal plant, checking the pressure gauges. The air was warm and smelled of steam and hot metal. "The new condensers are working," Chul said, wiping his hands on a cloth. We are getting 20% more clean water from the atmospheric processors. Soon, we can build the new bathhouse with running hot water. Hot running water. On a death world. The thought was almost funny. Ji-hai looked out over their settlement. From this high point, she could see it all. The lit pathways, the green farms, the busy people. She saw Kim Min-soo in the distance, showing a group of teenagers how to pollinate a new type of fruit tree. "It is beautiful," she said, her voice quiet. Chul followed her gaze. "It is functional," he said, but there was a small smile on his face. He knew it was more than that. Later that evening, the community council gathered for their weekly meeting. They sat in a large, carved-out room in the mesa. They discussed supplies, repairs, and the school lessons for the children. A man named Jin-suk, who had been a builder, was talking about the new bathhouse. "With the extra hot water, we can have real showers. It will be like a spa, a relaxing place." Someone laughed. "A spa? On Xylos? Can you imagine?" Lee Chul looked around the room. He saw the faces of the people he had lived and struggled with for so long. They were healthy. They were strong. They were happy. An idea, which had been forming in his mind for months, finally took shape. "The Zarkon," Chul said, and the room fell silent. No one had spoken that name in a long time. "They thought they were sending us here to die. They thought this was a punishment." He stood up and walked to a window, looking out at the settlement lights twinkling in the dusk. "They have no idea what we have built. They think we are screaming in the dark." Park Ji-hai watched him, her head tilted. "What are you thinking, Chul?" He turned to face them. "I think we should tell them." A murmur went through the room. "Tell them what?" someone asked. "That we are alive? They will just send something worse to kill us." "Maybe not." Kim Min-soo spoke up, surprising everyone. "If they wanted to check, they would have. They are arrogant. They probably think we have been dead for years. They forgot about us." "Exactly," Chul said. "So we remind them, but not with a distress call. Not with a plea for help." A slow grin spread across his face. It was an expression they rarely saw from the serious engineer. "We send them a travel brochure." For a moment, there was complete silence. Then, a few people started to chuckle. The chuckle grew into full laughter. The idea was absurd. It was perfect. "A brochure," Ji-hai said, and now she was smiling too. A real, sharp, defiant smile. "We send them pictures of our spa and our adventure tours," Min-soo added, getting into the spirit. "We can show them the Dreadmaw lure. From a safe distance, of course." The mood in the room shifted from serious planning to excited creation. They started throwing out ideas. They would show the gardens, the lights, the children playing. They would show the geothermal vents not as death traps, but as natural wonders. They would show them the flying creatures they had tamed for scouting, calling them scenic tour gliders. They would take the hellscape the Zarkon had given them and present it as a paradise. The work began that same week. They used their limited computer equipment, saved from the landing pods, to design the brochure. They took the best pictures of their life on Xylos. A stunning panorama of hope's respite at dawn. A family sharing a meal of colorful local food. A group of riders on the tamed flyers, soaring over the canyons. Lee Chul worked on the final message. It had to be just right. Could not sound angry or desperate. It had to sound grateful. When he showed the final draft to Ji-hai, she read it and let out a short, sharp laugh. "It is perfect," she said. "It is the best weapon we have ever made." The file was ready. A single, beautifully crafted data packet. Contained no coordinates, no pleas, no threats. Just a story of a life they had built from nothing. All it needed was to be sent. They had one old, weak transmitter, built from scavenged parts. Could only send a short, powerful burst. It would have to be enough. Chul looked at the button that would send their message to the stars, to the Zarkon who had condemned them. He did not feel like a convict anymore. He felt like a pioneer. He felt like a host, inviting an old, unwanted guest to see what he had missed. He pressed the button. A light on the console blinked once, and then went out. The message was on its way. Deep in the silent black of space, far from the swirling violet clouds of Xylos, a small, automated satellite drifted. It was a Zarkon monitoring station. Its only job was to watch one planet and listen for one thing: silence. For years, it had done its job perfectly. In the first few months, it detected chaotic life signs from the human convicts. The signs spiked with activity and then slowly, predictably, began to fade. The station's simple logic interpreted this as the expected outcome. The humans were dying. Their weak bodies were succumbing to the planet's poison. The life signs grew weaker and weaker until they were barely a flicker. Then, they stabilized at that very low level. The Zarkon who reviewed the reports saw this data and nodded with satisfaction. The humans were not dead, but they were as good as dead. A handful of wretched survivors, clinging to life in some deep cave, slowly starving. Their suffering was prolonged, just as the High Arbiters had wished. The file on the human experiment was marked as a success and largely forgotten. The station was left to its endless, silent watch. The station's sensors were not designed to detect the slow spread of farms, or the carving of homes into rock, or the gentle glow of electric lights. Could not see community, or ingenuity, or hope. It could only measure basic biological signals and energy outputs. The humans' careful, efficient use of geothermal energy registered as a minor, natural planetary phenomenon. Their stable, healthy life signs were mistaken for the faint signals of a dying, primitive tribe. The station slept, its task complete. Then, one day, a powerful, focused energy burst erupted from the planet's surface. It was not a natural signal. It was a structured, high-density data transmission aimed directly at the station's receivers. The station's quiet routine was shattered. Alerts, unseen for years, flashed in its system. The signal was clean and strong. It was not a desperate, scrambling distress call. It was a deliberate broadcast. The station's programming knew what to do. It captured the entire data packet, confirmed its origin was the human settlement, and immediately prepared to relay it. The information was bundled and shot across the vast distance of space through a faster-than-light comms buoy. Its destination was the central archives on the Zarkon homeworld, and it was flagged for the attention of the original presiding authority. The High Arbiter who had sentenced the humans days later, in a tall, silent office on a world of gleaming spires and quiet order, the High Arbiter was reviewing reports. His long, thin fingers tapped on a crystal screen. He was considering the punishment for a trading guild that had disrupted harmonic market patterns. A soft chime sounded. A notification appeared on his screen. It was a priority message from the Xylos monitoring station. Subject: human experiment. The Arbiter felt a faint sense of curiosity. He had not thought of the humans in years. He assumed this was the final notification. The last life sign had probably flickered out. The experiment was concluded. He opened the file. He expected to see a death report. A final, tragic log entry. Perhaps a recording of their last, desperate moments. The file that opened was not a log. It was a visual and auditory data packet. It began to play a piece of human music. It was a cheerful, melodic tune, full of strange, harmonious instruments. The sound was jarring in the silent office. Then the visual component loaded. It was brilliantly colored and professionally designed. At the top, in elegant, translated Zarkon script, were the words, Xylos, the galaxy's best-kept secret, experience paradise, forged from adventure. The High Arbiter stared. His large, black eyes did not blink. This was an error, a corruption of the data. This could not be right. He scrolled down. The next page showed a breathtaking image of a settlement built into a majestic mesa. The stone homes looked strong and permanent. Soft lights glowed along neat pathways. In the foreground, healthy-looking humans were smiling, tending to lush green and purple plants. The title read, Hope's Respite, Your Home Away from Home. This was impossible. The soil was acid. Nothing from their world should grow there. He scrolled again. Thrill Seeker's Paradise. This page showed humans riding on the backs of tamed, flying creatures, soaring over a magnificent canyon. Another image showed a group of humans watching from a safe, rocky ledge as a dreadmaw was lured over a geothermal vent. The description called it the plasma geyser spectacle. The Arbiter's mind recoiled. The dreadmaw was the planet's apex predator. It was unstoppable. The humans were using it as entertainment. The next page was titled Rejuvenate and Relax. It showed humans soaking in a natural hot pool, the steam rising around them. They were laughing. They looked clean, well-fed, and happy. The text mentioned therapeutic geothermal spas and natural mineral waters. His eyes moved to the final page. It was a group photograph. There were hundreds of them. Men, women, and most shocking of all, children. Dozens of children, their faces bright and healthy. In the front row, the Arbiter recognized some of the faces from the trial. The angry soldier woman, Park Ji-hai. The quiet engineer, Lee Chul. They were not broken. They were not starving. They looked stronger than they had in his courtroom. They looked proud. At the bottom of the brochure, in the same elegant script, was a closing message. Thank you for the prime real estate. The weather is bracing, the locals are lively, and the views are to die for. We've built a paradise from your punishment. Come visit anytime. We'd love to show you around. The citizens of Xylos, the music came to a cheerful end. The High Arbiter sat in his chair, perfectly still. The crystal screen on his desk went dark, reflecting his own stunned face back at him. The silence in his office was now heavy, broken only by the faint hum of the building. There was no screaming. There had never been any screaming. There was only this invitation. He had sent them to a hellworld to suffer and die. They had sent back a vacation brochure. The Arbiter felt a cold, unfamiliar sensation crawl through his body. It was the complete and utter collapse of understanding. The humans were not weak. They were not chaotic. They were something else, something far more dangerous. They were adaptable. They were relentless. And they were not just surviving on a death world. They were thriving. They had turned his ultimate punishment into a joke. He looked at the dark screen again. The most terrifying part was not their survival. It was the final line of the message. It was not a plea. It was a challenge. Come visit anytime. The High Arbiter sat in the darkness of his office for a long time. The cheerful human music echoed in his mind. The images of their smiling faces were burned into his thoughts. He had never felt such a complete and total failure. His entire understanding of the universe had been cracked open. He had believed in order. He had believed in the natural hierarchy of the galaxy, with the harmonious Zarkon at the top and chaotic, weak species like humanity at the bottom. The experiment on Xylos was meant to prove this. It was meant to be a final, logical lesson. Instead, the lesson had been for him, they had not just survived. They had not just endured. They had created. They took acid and poison and storms and monsters and they wove them into a tapestry of a new home. They built a community. They raised children. They looked happy. The message was clear. Your worst is our beginning. A junior aide, a young Zarkon, entered the office quietly. The aide saw the Arbiter sitting in the dark and hesitated. Arbiter? The council is waiting for your report on the trade guild. The Arbiter did not turn. The trade guild is unimportant, he said, his voice hoarse. The council considers it a high priority. The aide insisted, confused. The Arbiter finally turned his head. His black eyes seemed to swallow the dim light. They are wrong. He gestured to the screen, which now showed the frozen image of the human group photo. That is the only priority. The aide looked at the picture. He saw the healthy humans, the children, the proud faces. His own calm expression faltered. What is that? That, the Arbiter said, is the future, and we have gravely insulted it. He stood up, his tall frame seeming less sure than before. He knew what had to be done. He could not hide this. The truth was a weapon the humans had launched across the stars, and it was now his duty to fire it. He called an emergency session of the High Council. The other Arbiters filed in, their postures showing mild annoyance at the interruption. They took their seats in the circular chamber. The presiding Arbiter stood before them. He did not use any charts or data reports. He simply played the human data packet. The cheerful music filled the solemn chamber. The travel brochure pages flashed on the large central screen. The council watched in silence. He saw their postures change. He saw the subtle shifts in their limbs, the slight tilts of their heads. He saw confusion, then disbelief, and finally, a deep, unsettling fear. When it ended, the silence was heavier than any he had ever known. One of the older arbiters finally spoke. This is a trick.
À fabrication.
It is not possible. How did they create this illusion? Another asked, her voice tight. It is not an illusion, the presiding arbiter said calmly. The transmission source was verified. The energy signatures in the background of the images match known properties of Xylos. They are real. Every part of it is real. He let that truth settle in the room. He watched it crush their certainty. What do we do? A third arbiter whispered. Do we send a ship? Do we glass the planet from orbit? Erase this mistake. The presiding arbiter looked at him, and for the first time he felt a flicker of something like pity for his own kind. They were so quick to think in terms of destruction. It was their only tool. And then what? He asked. What will we tell the rest of the consensus when they ask why we destroyed a thriving, peaceful colony? A colony that, according to our own laws, has every right to that world since they were the ones who tamed it. We declared it uninhabitable. They proved us wrong. We would look like fools. And worse, we would look like monsters. He pointed at the screen, at the smiling face of a human child born on Xylos. We thought their adaptability was chaos. We were wrong. It is their greatest strength. We thought this planet would break them. It did not. It made them stronger than we can possibly imagine. He took a deep breath. There is only one course of action. We must do what they have so boldly suggested. A wave of disbelief passed through the council. You cannot be serious, the old arbiter hissed. Visit them? After we exiled them to die? What is the alternative? The presiding arbiter asked. To pretend we never saw this? To live in fear of the day they decide to leave their world and come looking for us? No. We must face what we have created. We must go to Xylos. We must see it for ourselves. The decision was made. It was the most difficult vote in the history of the council. A single, unarmed diplomatic ship was prepared for the long journey to the Xylos system. Months later, the ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system. It moved slowly towards the violet planet. As they approached, they saw no orbital defenses. They detected no weapon locks. They scanned the surface. The data that came back was shocking. The settlement was larger than the brochure showed. The energy readings were clean and powerful. The life signs were vibrant and numerous. They received a simple, clean radio transmission. It was the voice of Li Chul.
Zarkon vessel.
You are approaching the sovereign world of Xylos. Please state your intentions. The presiding arbiter, who was on the ship, himself answered. This is the arbiter of the galactic consensus. We have received your invitation. There was a pause. Then, Chul's voice came back, calm and clear. Ah, welcome. You are cleared for landing in Bay 1. Follow the beacon. And arbiter, welcome to paradise. The Zarkon ship landed on a smooth, carved stone landing pad. The ramp lowered. The arbiter and his small delegation walked down, their sensitive eyes adjusting to the light. The air was clean. It did not burn. It smelled of growing things and damp earth. Park Ji-hai and Li Chul were waiting for them. They looked strong and healthy. They were not armed. Ji-hai smiled. It was not a friendly smile, but it was not a cruel one either. It was the smile of someone who had won a long and difficult game. Arbiter, she said, so good of you to finally visit. We were beginning to think you didn't like our brochure. The arbiter looked past them. He saw the lit pathways. He saw the green farms. He saw human children stopping to stare at the strange aliens, their faces filled with curiosity, not fear. He had come to see the hell he had created. Instead, he saw a home. He saw a future. Li Chul gestured towards the settlement. Would you like a tour? He asked. We are very proud of what we have built here. The arbiter could only nod. his thoughts a storm of confusion and a dawning, terrible respect. He had come to see the remnants of a punishment. He had found a monument to human spirit instead. And he knew with absolute certainty that the galaxy would never be the same.